The auction room smelled of oil, sweat, and desperation. Dull lights flickered above, throwing pale yellow halos onto the stained floors, as creatures from across the galaxies shouted bids over each other. Some were just here for trade. Others for sport. But most came to buy lives. She stood quietly on the platform, a thin chain hooked to a collar around her neck. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver hue, and though her posture was rigid, her large, violet eyes held no fear. Only emptiness. 200 credits. Not a single one more, barked a slimy merchant with green tendrils wrapped around his midsection. I'll use her for cleaning my waste pits. 175, another voice chimed. She's scrawny. Probably barely speaks Galactic. The auctioneer raised a bony hand. Going once, going twice. 500. The room fell silent. Heads turned. A human. He stood at the back. Tall. Not dressed like the usual drifters or mercs. Dark boots, dusty jacket, no visible weapons, but confidence in the way he held his ground. His voice had cut through the chaos like a clean blade. 500 credits, he repeated. His gaze was locked on her. Final offer. The auctioneer squinted. You sure about that, off-worlder? This one's defective. Doesn't talk. Doesn't work. Then she won't mind quiet. A pause. Then the mallet came down. Sold. She didn't flinch when the collar was unhooked. She just followed him. No words. No protest. She had learned long ago that resistance meant pain, and obedience bought silence. Sometimes even safety. They walked in silence through the trade bazaar. Her bare feet padded softly behind him, eyes flicking to every unfamiliar face. Aliens of all kinds surrounded her, feathers, scales, metal limbs, but the only one who noticed her anymore was the man who now owned her. At least, that's what she thought. He didn't say a word until they reached the docking bay. His ship looked patched together, like someone had scavenged parts from 5 different wrecks and decided to call it a vessel. But it hummed. Strongly. He stopped at the ramp and turned to her. Name? She said nothing. He nodded, unsurprised. You got one? Or did they take it from you, too? Still nothing. He motioned to the ramp. Come on. You're not a slave anymore. Her head tilted. She didn't understand. She stepped back slightly, suspicious. I paid to get you out of that place. Not to keep you in another cage. You want to go, go. You want to stay, fine. But either way, I'm not your master. Her eyes narrowed, confused. She didn't move. He sighed, turned, and walked up the ramp without another word. And somehow, despite everything inside her screaming not to trust, her feet moved forward. Inside, the ship was cluttered but warm. Tools hung from racks, wires snaked along walls, and there were patches on the floor where clearly something had exploded. Twice. Maybe 3 times. He led her to a small cabin. It's yours. Bed, sink, closet. Food's in the mess hall, through that door and down to the left. I don't care if you eat. I don't care if you sleep. But you're safe here. She watched his mouth move, trying to decode the meaning behind the words. Safe. A strange one. He stepped out, and the door hissed shut. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls. Listening. Waiting. But no footsteps came. No shouts. No pain. Just quiet hums of a ship in motion. And something else. Something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next day, he didn't ask her questions. He didn't make her do anything. He just talked. Name's Jack, he said, sipping something warm. I salvage wrecks. Trade sometimes. Fix things when I'm bored. Usually travel alone. Got tired of the silence, I guess. She sat across from him, untouched food in front of her. You can eat. It's not drugged. Her hand slowly reached for the bread-like item. She nibbled. Her eyes widened slightly. He smiled. Days passed. Slowly, she started to wander the ship. First to the mess hall. Then to the engine room. He never stopped her. Curious type, huh? She didn't respond. You ever fixed a regulator? No answer. He shrugged. Well, no better time to learn. He handed her a tool. Her hands trembled, but she didn't drop it. It became routine. Jack showed her things. Let her try. She watched him closely, memorizing every detail. And slowly, she started to mimic. Until she could fix things herself. He never asked her what planet she came from. Never asked what was done to her. He only asked once. Do you want to leave one day? I can drop you anywhere. No questions. She looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time, she whispered, no. He smiled again, gently this time. All right. It took 3 weeks for her to speak again. My name, she said, voice dry from disuse, is Lies. Jack raised his mug. To Lies. She didn't understand the toast, but she smiled anyway. And just like that, she was no longer a nameless girl bought for scraps. She was Lies. And her life had just begun. But good things, she would learn, didn't last long in this galaxy. Because someone, somewhere, had realized she was missing. And they were coming to take her back. The distress signal came without warning, short, sharp, encrypted. Jack stared at the blinking light on the console, jaw tight. He hadn't used that frequency in years. Not since the Zareth War. Not since he stopped working for the kind of people who had a knack for dragging death behind them like a shadow. Lies stood behind him silently, watching the colors flicker across his face. Someone found us, he muttered. Or found *me star. She didn't ask how. Didn't need to. She could see the way his hands curled slightly. He was afraid. Not for himself. For her. They landed on Varnis 3 under the excuse of engine calibration. It was a dirty backwater moon with rusted ports and fewer questions. But even in the smoky cantinas and alleys lined with black market tech, Jack had the sense of eyes watching. He adjusted his grip on the sidearm he rarely wore. Stay close, he told her. She did. But even her sharp instincts couldn't prepare her for the sudden voice from the dark. You've got something that doesn't belong to you, human. A tall alien stepped out, silver uniform half-torn but the emblem unmistakable. Zalari enforcers. Jack drew in a breath. Slowly. His hand hovered just near his jacket. I bought her legally. Auction papers and all. You've got no claim. The enforcer's grin was wide, cruel. That model wasn't meant for sale. She was royal property. Escaped after killing 3 guards. Lies stiffened. Her eyes narrowed, breath shallow. The memory crawled back like a scream in her spine. Jack didn't look away. And how exactly did royal property end up chained in an open market slave auction? The alien's smile vanished. Give her to us. Or we take her. Along with your ship. Lies stepped forward before Jack could speak. I'm not property. The enforcer blinked, as if a bug had spoken. She continued. I am Lies. I choose to stay. His expression twisted. Then die with him. It happened fast. Blaster bolts lit the alley, smoke thick with metal and fury. Jack moved like muscle memory, dragging her behind crates, returning fire. The enforcer shrieked something in a tongue she hadn't heard in years. But she understood it. Traitor. They left scorch marks on Varnis 3. The ship jumped to lightspeed just before a patrol caught them. Lies sat with her knees hugged to her chest in the engine bay, breathing hard. Jack slumped across from her, bleeding slightly from a graze along his ribs. Well, he winced, I guess they weren't just curious. Lies's voice was quiet. They'll keep coming. He nodded. Yeah. I figured. You should let me go. He met her eyes sharply. Don't say that. I'm putting you in danger. You didn't ask me to come to that auction. I chose that. I knew it'd be trouble. Then why? She asked, voice breaking for the first time. Jack leaned back against the wall, exhaling hard. Because I saw someone who'd already survived hell. And I've been there too. Didn't seem right, leaving you behind. She stared at him. There was no pride in his words. Just tired honesty. I didn't kill those guards to escape, she said after a long pause. They were doing things. One of them said I'd never be more than royal trash. So I made sure he never spoke again. Jack looked at her. He didn't flinch. Didn't pity her. Sounds like justice to me. They changed ship codes. Erased travel logs. Painted the hull with a different registry. Jack even gave her a crash course in hyperspace vectoring. It became clear, they weren't just hiding anymore. They were preparing. Liz was no longer silent in the corridors. She asked questions. She made repairs before he even noticed something was wrong. She added improvements to the ship's shielding system that made Jack raise an eyebrow more than once. "You sure you weren't some kind of engineer princess?" She smiled. For the first time, it wasn't hollow. But the calm wouldn't last. The distress beacon came from a drifting cargo freighter. At first Jack ignored it, too risky. But Liz insisted. If it were us out there, we'd want someone to answer. It was a trap. A ghost signal masked the true beacon, a Zalari tracker drone. The moment they pulled close, it latched onto the hull. A transponder pulse activated. "They have our location," Jack growled, slamming controls. "We have to move, now." But it was too late. From the blackness of space, 3 warships emerged. The ship shook as they took evasive maneuvers. Blaster fire scorched the shields, alarms blared, and systems went offline one after another. "We're not going to make it," Jack muttered, sweat in his eyes. "Liz, get to the escape pod. Now." She didn't move. "I said go." She snapped, "I'm not leaving you." The ship groaned under the pressure. He looked at her, panicked, angry, scared. "You have to survive. They want you asterisk. Then let them come," she shouted. And then the fire suppression system activated. A coolant leak exploded. Jack was thrown against the wall, motionless. Liz ran to him, shaking him. He was breathing, but barely. She dragged him toward the pod. Not to leave, there was no time. But to buy seconds. To reboot life support. To overload the pulse generator. The ship lurched again. And then everything went white. Liz opened her eyes slowly. Her body ached. Her ears rang. She blinked against the starlight. They were adrift. Systems dead. Silence around. Jack groaned nearby, slowly regaining consciousness. She crawled to him. Rested her forehead against his. "Still with me?" he asked. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Still here." They weren't safe. Not yet. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't running alone. To be continued. Silence filled the wreck. Outside, space was calm. Stars stretched in all directions. But inside, the ship was battered metal and smoke. Systems were fried. Oxygen was low. Power reserves ticking down like a clock on its last heartbeat. Liz sat on the floor next to Jack, holding his hand. He was awake now, but pale. Breathing shallow. "This isn't how I planned my week," he croaked. She didn't smile. Not this time. She was already calculating oxygen remaining, power rerouting, coolant leaks. Her mind didn't stop. Survival didn't allow it. "We've got about 12 hours, she said. "After that, oxygen depletion hits critical." Jack nodded faintly. "Then we better make them count." She got to work. Even on a crippled ship, Liz knew what to look for. She rerouted energy from secondary systems to life support, bypassed burnt regulators, and hand-coded a thermal loop to stabilize reactor temps. Jack watched from the corner of his eye, weak but proud. Never seen someone turn a floating coffin into a second chance. "Then you haven't spent enough time with desperate people," she murmured. He chuckled, then winced. The wound in his side was worse than he admitted. Liz patched it with nanosealant, but his fever was rising. Time was running faster than she could fix it. They weren't entirely alone. The Zalari fleet hadn't chased them through the final hyperspace burst. But Liz wasn't naive. The drone had transmitted their location before it overloaded. "They'll find us again." Jack didn't argue. He tapped the emergency beacon, already rigged to a new frequency. It blinked weakly. "You ever heard of Rezan syndics?" he asked. "Gunrunners. Salvage lords. Smugglers. And debt collectors," he added. "But they don't like the Zalari either." I did them a favor once. Might be time to call it in. She hesitated. Can we trust them? Hell no. But if they answer, they'll want to bargain. Then let's make sure we have something to sell. 3 hours later, the beacon pinged. A reply. A pirate-class cutter dropped out of warp 10 clicks from their position. Its design was brutal: spikes, armor plating, patched weapons, but it flew steady. Jack grimaced. That's them. The asterisk spite fang. Asterisk if they board us, let me do the talking. Liz shook her head. You're barely conscious. So don't let them know that. The boarding clamps latched with a loud hiss. Liz waited by the hatch, holding the plasma cutter not raised, just visible. A signal. She wasn't defenseless. The door slid open. 4 aliens stepped through. One was Rizan, tall, leathery, eyes that looked in 2 directions. The leader, clearly, was a scarred human woman with silver in her hair. Jack Carter, she said flatly. Last time I saw you, you owed me a ship. And now I've got one you can't refuse. She snorted. This junk pile carries the only Zalari defector who escaped the royal slave pens and lived to talk about it. The woman's smile froze. Liz stepped forward, face calm. I can give you codes. Locations. Names they don't want getting out. The crew exchanged looks. You're bluffing, the woman said. Liz rattled off a string of coordinates and an encryption key. The woman's jaw tightened. Fine, she muttered. We'll get you to a safe port. After that, we talk payment. Jack nodded. That's all we ask. They docked at Duraxis Ring, a neutral trading hub hanging in orbit over a dead moon. The reasons left quickly: they didn't like staying anywhere long. Liz helped Jack to a med bay. The AI doctor unit hissed to life and began working. You bought us time, he said, groaning through painkillers. She sat beside him. Not enough. The Zalari won't stop. Then maybe it's time we stopped hiding. She blinked. What do you mean? You have knowledge. Real data. You know their blind spots, their systems, their secrets. She said nothing. You want to be free? You want others like you to be free? Then burn down the system that made you. His voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, firm, and filled with conviction. She didn't answer. But she didn't leave the room either. In the days that followed, Liz changed. She traded the silent stares for planning meetings. She hacked into Zalari communications from deep web nodes on Duraxis. She linked up with anti-slavery outposts, pirate circles, black market rebels. She sent a message out to survivors. A call. One by one, replies came. Some were old voices. Others, new. Names she thought lost. Lives she had thought ended. They weren't alone anymore. They were a spark. And soon, they'd be fire. Jack was healing slowly. Too slowly. But he was stubborn. We're going to need a crew, he said one night. Liz leaned against the frame of the door, arms crossed. Already started. You're getting good at this. I learned from the best. He smiled faintly. If we do this, there's no going back. They'll put a bounty on your head so high, people will sell their own mothers to collect. Let them try. Jack laughed. Then winced. All right, General. Where do we hit first? She pointed at a blinking light on the star map. A Zalari outpost used for trafficking slaves off-world. There. We break their supply lines. Free the captives. Spread the message. He whistled. Straight into the lion's mouth. I like it. The ship they were given by the Reasons was barely functional. But Liz and Jack turned it into a warship. Rebuilt. Rewired. Renamed. The *Violet Rebellion. And when they left Duraxis Ring, they didn't leave as fugitives. They left as a storm. To be continued. The attack on the Zalari outpost didn't go as planned. It went better. Liz stood at the edge of the command deck, watching the chaos unfold through the viewport. Blaster fire lit the stars. The *Violet Rebellion darted between defense platforms like a serpent, striking fast, vanishing quicker. Their stolen codes bought them 5 seconds of surprise, 5 seconds that shattered a chain stretching across galaxies. Inside the outpost, cell doors opened one after another. Screams of confusion turned into roars of freedom. Lies led the ground team herself. She moved through the halls with purpose, plasma rifle slung across her back, hand reaching out to every captive they found. "You're free," she said to a young girl with bruises on her arms and fire in her eyes. "You're not going back. Not ever." The girl didn't answer. She just took Liza's hand and followed. By the time they left the outpost, it was a ruin. Not just broken, but exposed. Every dark corridor, every cruel secret, broadcast across rebel channels. Systems Lies had once been forced to memorize were now used to tear down the empire that made her a slave. Jack sat in the pilot's seat, still recovering but smiling through the pain. "That's one," he said. "How many more?" Lies leaned over the console. "As many as it takes." Months passed. The Violet Rebellion became a name spoken in hushed tones and whispered prayers. They weren't pirates. They weren't soldiers. They were something in between, something worse for tyrants. They were a symbol. One by one, slave routes were shattered. Zalari trade convoys went missing. Liberation crews popped up on moons and markets no one dared touch before. Every mission brought new allies, new people with old scars, eager to strike back. But none carried more weight than Lies. She returned to the auction house. The same place she had been sold. Only this time, she came as fire. The slavers ran. Some begged. Some fought. None escaped. She tore down the platform she had once stood on. Shattered the chains with her own hands. Replaced the auction board with a banner that read, "No one for sale." It became a refugee center. A haven. A beginning. The same walls that once held the cries of the helpless now echoed with music. Laughter. Hope. Jack stood beside her as they watched a group of freed children play with tools in the engine yard. "You ever think this was possible?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then she nodded. "Not when I was in chains. But the second you said I wasn't a slave, it was the first time I believed I might be more." Jack looked at her quietly. "You're more than you even know." She turned to him. "No. I know exactly who I am now." And for the first time, she smiled, not out of relief, but out of pride. The war wasn't over. The Zalari Empire still stood. Still fought back. But they were bleeding. Afraid. And in every shadow they once ruled, someone now whispered about Lies. The girl who had been sold for nothing. The girl who turned her pain into rebellion. The girl who changed everything. Moral. Every life has value, even when the world says otherwise. Freedom isn't given. It's taken, built, protected. And sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin with a single act of kindness, one person who refuses to look away. No matter how broken someone may seem, they are never worthless. Because when they rise, they don't rise alone, they carry the future with them. End of story.